please welcome our guest, Tom Mallon.
Thank you, Peter, and Paul and Michael, who introduced me to this august group. The video, that was a surprise. I don't know where you found that. That was for Corporate Chaplains of America, not even the group you're going to hear from. So what I learned from that is, number one, I needed a haircut when they took the video. And number two, I need to dye my hair now. So, and your story about Nairobi, I've been to the Mathare Valley twice. And it is a life-changing experience if any of you have a chance to go serve in Africa. And we were doing some relief work. I used to be on our church mission team in Chicago for 17 years, and I ran the team for 4 years. So we had half of our missionaries were indigenous missionaries, and we never went to visit them. And I said, we can't do this. We have to find out, are they doing their job? Are they doing what they say? They can come and tell us what they're doing when we have our mission festival. Chip, how you doing? But are they really doing it? And so we started going to these places, and it is life-changing for you. You can't even look at your garbage can the same way because they have they just use everything. And it's truly a life-changing experience. So I'd encourage any of you who have a chance. Oh, the other thing, we were doing relief work, and we were handing out. I went to India and Sri Lanka after the tsunami, and we were handing starting over packages to people. You really got me on the mission thing. You shouldn't have started with that. I'm gonna miss out on some of my comments, but. So we said to our mission partner, we feel uncomfortable as the white people coming over from the United States and handing this out. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, the fact that you came here to support us in our leadership lifts us up in the eyes of our people. And it was truly, in so many ways, life-changing and reorienting what we thought we should be doing versus what they needed us to do. So anyway, that's a great experience. So I'm going to tell you a story. And my story is of tragedy and triumph in the sale of our company, Regent Surgical Health. We sold it to an ESOP at the end of 2016. And then the subsequent sale of the company to a PE hospital joint venture in 2021. It's basically how I led how that led to my partners and I creating Perpetuate Capital that Paul had referenced. And our goal is to assist Christian business owners in their desire to continue the ministry and mission of their business. Okay, my background, I grew up in Southern Ohio. If any of you have read Hillbilly Elegy, that's basically where I grew up. Half my town was from West Virginia, half my town was, Ohio. And my father was we lived in Lancaster, Ohio, which is between Athens and Columbus. And it is the home of Anchor Hawk and Glass. And all my uncles and my dad were mold makers and machinists. And most of them didn't have all their fingers. They had donated them to the cause over the years. And when I was in 8th grade, we lived in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. I had 7 brothers and sisters, so 9 of us lived in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house till I was in 8th grade. And at that point, my dad had gotten into, he changed jobs with 7 kids, and he went to sell life insurance for New York Life, which he did for 30 years. That was his sweet spot. He was a salesman. He hated the factory work, and it was a joy for our family to see that happen. So that influenced me a lot, and I'll tell you how it changed my trajectory. So my faith journey started when I was in college. We were raised Catholic, of course, 7 kids. They didn't know how to stop it, so they kept going. There was 4 years difference between the first 4 and the second 3, and I think my mom found the pill at that point, and the priest told my dad she had to stop, and then we had 3 more kids. And my mom never really forgave the Catholic Church for that. But we wouldn't ever do away with the last 3. The last 3 are really cool people. So because we had 7 kids, and my dad, he didn't have the money to send us to college. So he said, you're going to have to figure it out. And 3 of us have figured it out. 3 of us graduated from college. 4 of us didn't. Of the 3 that graduated from college, we have 2 MBAs, a master's in missions, and a doctorate in education. So 3 of us got enough degrees for all 7, but it wasn't evenly distributed. So when I was in college, I worked a year in the glass factory for a summer job to pay my way through school. Then worked for the post office, and then I was transferred to Denison in my sophomore year, and I met a kid who became a dear friend who had sold books door to door for the Southwestern Company the summer before. Did that too. Did you really? Has anybody else? Pots and pans, knives. It's a fabulous experience. So I was a slow learner. I did it for 7 summers. I was the only Harvard Business School graduate selling books door to door outside of Lubbock, Texas, after I graduated in 1982 because I couldn't get a job. 1982 was a bad time to graduate from school. So I did that in my first summer. I was working with a bunch of kids from Arkansas, and these kids were on fire for the Lord, and they kept talking about being saved, and I'm Catholic. I mean, I don't know what that means. And so about the 3rd or 4th week of the summer, I prayed, Lord, tell me if I'm saved. I have no idea what this means. And over the next 3 or 4 days, the Lord showed me, like very vividly, 4 or 5 times in my life that I was at a pivotal point and how he provided for me in a supernatural way. And at that point, I knew I was saved, I knew he loved me, and it was life-changing. My family noticed it when I came home. I mean, I didn't have all my stuff squared away, but I had a lot more squared away after that. I had an anger problem. That all went away. So there were some things that really were beneficial to me personally from that experience. From Southwestern, I was a student manager. I recruited other kids, friends, to come do this with me. By the time I was in my 3rd year, I had like 70 kids in my organization. Got accepted to business school, went to business school, met my wife, wonderful experience in Boston, came out and didn't have a job, and so sold books again, and then got a job in commercial real estate, which I did for 11 years. It was fine, but I really wanted an equity opportunity for my family, and there was none available. I mean, we were down in 1990 and 94, everything was being foreclosed on, and we became the repo experts in Chicago. We foreclosed on a ton of buildings for some great clients, but they didn't want to own them, so there was really no opportunity for me. So I started looking at different industries, and there were 2 industries that I had most fascinated with, and it was all because we baby boomers are going to break before we die. And we're going to die, and we're going to break before we die. So I said either surgery centers or funeral homes. And so I decided on surgery centers because we do break before we die, and especially the last few years, there's been great opportunities in funeral homes and crematoriums and all that. But I went to the surgery center business, and we found one in downtown Chicago, and I put together 2 other guys, and the 3 of us bought this center. It was a great success. It was a turnaround. We bought it for less than the assets. And we bought it for $1 million and put $50,000 down, financed $950,000, and within 2 years we were making $1 million a year from the 3 of us. And it was a very successful business. We ended up with 4 surgery centers in Chicago, and the I had chosen poorly for my partners, and it was a disaster. We had all kinds of conflict, and we ended up splitting up. I said, we need to sell this business, or you guys need to buy me out. That week, my dad dies. And my dad was my best friend. I was crushed. So I disappeared for 6 weeks to solve my dad's estate and all that. Then I had a huge health problem. And I mean, God took my dream of my business, he took my best friend, and he took my health all within about a month. And I had a viral inner ear infection. Have any of you ever had one of those? You are literally seasick for 6 weeks. You're on your back for 3 weeks, and you're seasick, and you know you've got dizziness for like 6 months. So I went through all that, and through that, God really, the best way I can say it is he rotor-rooted my soul. And I had a fear and worry problem with my first business. I never had another day. I mean, my fear level went from a 8 to 10, down to a 1. And that's how I was able to do my second business. And those of you who run businesses, it is the most common problem I think entrepreneurs have is the fear that's down there, fear of failure, fear of losing a big customer, and that's what causes people not to do the right thing so often. So I was able to do the right thing much more often. I'm sure my first business didn't, that partnership, I owned part of that failure, but I still chose poorly on my 2 partners. So you have to look at, it isn't always the other side. When you're pointing at somebody else, you've always got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. I had to own my part of that. And that put me behind by about 2 years. I kind of fumbled around until I decided to start Regent Surgical Health in 2001. That business was also very successful. It was, we had, there were 12 of us that put money in or worked for free. We had $2.5 million that we had invested in the business. And we ended up in 16 years doing 36 surgery centers with that money. And we would go in, we'd buy it, build it, whatever. We would get doctor partners to come in, we would get hospitals to join us. And sometimes we would sell, most of the time we held. So at the end of the day, we had 24 surgery centers. But the company spun off $32 million in those 16 years. So it was a really good company. Problem is, I had a business strategy that backfired on me, and that was I age discriminated. We only hired old people. And when they were old, they got older. And I had 2 partners who were over 70, and then I had another widow who owned 10% of the company, and we had to do something. And my parents both died at 64 and 66, and I'm 61, and I'm thinking, I want to have, my wife has put up with me all these years. I need to reward her with her desire to travel. So it was the right thing for us to do. In 2015, we were ready to go to market in a month. This is the tragedy part. My passion is fly fishing. I'm with a friend up in the Driftless area of Wisconsin. I'm coming out on a Sunday morning. It's Mother's Day morning, and I got to get back to my wife because I'm stealing part of Mother's Day. I turn on my phone, which has been off all weekend, and it blows up like a slot machine. It's flashing. All these calls are coming in. And the first one that got through when I turned it on was my partner and CFO. And he said, "Did you hear the news?" I said, "What news?" He said, Nap Gary went out on a run and died on the path. Now, Nap Gary was our chief operating officer. He was the young guy on the team. He was my successor. He was a lawyer. He went to Duke. He went to got his law degree at WashU. He was head of our association in Washington. He ran our political action committee for our industry. He was well known, and he was a funny, great partner, and he owned 10% of the business. So this really put us into a spin. for 6 months, we just kind of floundered around. We had our book set to go. We had our prospect list of people who had expressed interest. So I went ahead and did all that, didn't hire a banker, and did it, and I sleptwalked my way through it. And we ended up we had talked to a gentleman, Chris Bishop, who was going to join us as head of development. When Knapp died, I said to Chris, would you come join us? I'll bring you in as president, and then next year, we'll figure out what we're going to do with this company. But next year, I'll promote you to CEO, and then you can run this company. And Chris was a terrific guy. So we ended up in a letter of intent with a group called National Cardiovascular Partners, which was a subsidiary of Fresenius, which is a German dialysis company. And I went to a medical director meeting, and the medical directors were upset with National Cardiovascular Partners because they weren't giving them contracts. They were upset. The National Cardiovascular Partners was upset with Fresenius US because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and Fresenius US had spent and wasted tons of money for Fresenius Germany, and they were adverse. So I saw adversity through this entire chain. Had a board call, and we've never had a vote that was not unanimous. Well, this board call, it was 3 people said, yes, we should do this, and 3 people said, no, we shouldn't. These guys are scoundrels. And I knew that people who voted for the no were correct, but I had to vote yes because we didn't have flexibility. We were on our backs at this point without a leader going forward and with a desire to have to sell. Went into letter of intent, brought Chris Bishop in, and he started in November. He had a non-compete that he had to burn off, so November was his date that he could start. And it was interesting because when Knapp was going to be CEO, I said, you've never been CEO before. You have got to join a CEO roundtable. And the 2 out there are Vistage and C12. And I was involved in C12. How many of you are familiar with C12? Are you in it? No?
I just went to a couple meetings.
Okay, it's a great organization. And so he went to both organizations, and he said, I'm going to go to Vistage. And Knapp was not a man of faith, wasn't practicing his faith, and that was his decision. I was fine with it because he would then get the benefit of the CEO roundtable. So Chris starts, and I said, Chris, you've never been CEO before, so you have to go to a CEO roundtable. There's either C12 or Vistage. Now let me warn you that the last guy I gave this choice to, he chose Vistage, and he died a week later. So think hard about this. The benefit was Chris is a strong believer and was a strong believer and has submitted himself to the discipline of this organization and did a magnificent job for us. So in March of 2016, the deal was falling apart. There was so much dysfunction on their part, and then they tried to renegotiate, and I said, forget it, we're done, and we walked away. So we then hired and they had offered us $16 million for what was left of the company. We hired an investment banker, and we said, your job is to get a private equity offers or a strategic offer, and we will look at the ESOP, Chris, myself, and our CFO. And so we went to a deep dive into what is an ESOP. We hired a consultant. He did a feasibility study for us, lots of details that we had to work through, but I had very skeptical partners. And my CFO partner is a skeptic on a good day, and on a bad day, he's really skeptical. And he thought, you have to sell at a discount, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it increases your liability for the labor department. And we were getting surveyed by every health department in the world, and there were every couple weeks we were able to solve one of his problems, and it looked like this was possibly going to work out. So after, by the time September rolled around, we had gotten offers from strategics that were the best. We had a $21 million offer for the company from Medtronic in Minnesota. Some of you, I heard somebody lived in Minnesota. It's a great company, and it would have been a fine deal. However, 20% holdback. The more lawyers than we had employees. It was not going to be an easy deal to finalize. The due diligence was going to be a killer. They didn't know the business. We were one of their big customers, but they didn't know the provider business. And so I signed a letter of intent with them on September 1st and said, this is subject to a 30-day continued due diligence on the ESOP. We had a couple things we had to nail down yet for the ESOP. And they said, okay. They were very gracious about it. And so we get all of our questions answered, and October 1st was a Sunday. And I'm listening I'm in Lake Tahoe with my bride, watching a live stream of a dear friend of mine who's one of our pastors back in Chicago. And just out of the blue, a question that my C12 chair kept asking me through the whole process. He kept asking me, what is the best decision you can make for your company's future that will perpetuate the ministry and mission of your business? And I kept making excuses. That's not the question I can ask myself. I have this widow. I have these guys that'll never work again. We need to get as much money as possible for these folks for the effort that they put in. But the Holy Spirit had first of all the answers we had to the question said the ESOP was equal or better to cash at closing than the Medtronic deal. Even though we had an ESOP transaction at $20 million, the Medtronic gave us 21, but they were having a 20% holdback. I had to work 3 more years. Everybody else got to retire. That wasn't fair. My wife pointed that out to me rather emphatically. And so that was I had answered the questions that I thought I could sell this to my partners, answered all their concerns. And so the Holy Spirit right into my brain said, what is the direction you can take? Because my stomach is churning for months over this. What is the decision you can make for the future of your company that'll increase the ministry and mission of the business? And at that point, I said, it's an ESOP, Lord. And peace came on me. It was like a light switch going off, and I knew where we needed to go at that point. The next week, my board approved that direction, which was great. And then we had a real God problem. We had 20% of the transaction was going to be seller financing. In an ESOP, if you're a seller, you can protect your gain and your cash at closing by electing a 1042 exchange, similar to a 1031 in real estate. So you don't have to pay taxes at it currently. You pay taxes when you trade your into stocks and bonds of U.S. companies, and it's just like trading for another piece of real estate. And so that was why everybody would put 20% in. They were going to pay that to Uncle Sam anyway, but it created an asset for us and an 8% loan to live off of for our retirement. So the bank was willing, JP Morgan was willing to put in 25%. So we had, or 30%. So we had 50% of the financing set. 50% wasn't set. That was October 1st. We want to close by December 31st. So I told the banker, I said, while we're not doing the transaction with Medtronic, we need you to raise mezzanine capital for our middle piece, $11 million. And he went out and he got 4 offers for that. And it was like they took it on a copy machine, and they took one offer and made it 4 times, 4 different groups. 12% current, 2% accrued, and 30% of the upside. And I looked at it and said, that's going to dilute the heck out of the sellers. And we've worked too hard to be diluted by these guys. We're not going to do that. In the meantime, I got 4 calls from doctor partners. We have 400 doctor partners, but we have some that we're really close to. And they said, why are you going outside of your doctor partners to solve your capital problems? And I said, well, the sellers are willing to take 8%, and whatever the trustee will give them on the upside for warrants, would you be willing to do that? Absolutely. So I went on the road, and I talked to 72 of our 400 partners. 42 of them ended up writing checks for the $11 million that we needed. And there was ups and downs and all that, and it was a lot of drama, but by the end of the year, we had it all set and good to go. It was interesting because when you have 42 people, and I probably had to talk to 50 or so, a couple of them didn't do it at the end of the day. I had to talk to each one 3 times because they all thought they were making an equity investment in the company. I said, no, you're making a loan with an equity component to it. And it was just a lot of work. New Year's Eve came, and my family was all in Lake Tahoe. And at 8 o'clock, I went to bed because we had closed the day before, and I was spent. I was exhausted, but it was such a wonderful exhaustion. I never had a doubt that the Lord would deliver this because He told me to do it. It was just an amazing experience. So what happened then? We became an ESOP. The same board administered the company for the next 4.5 years. We paid off our senior debt in 2 or 3 years. The company becomes a qualified pension plan, so all the cash flow stays in the company. We don't pay taxes anymore, not until the employees take the money out of their accounts, like an IRA. So we had better cash flow, paid off our debt. The ministry, this is another part of the story that I'm embarrassed by. I was the chief ministry officer, and I was kind of a closet ministry officer because I had several partners who probably wouldn't have been, they okayed the corporate chaplain, but anything else they were not real excited about. So I had started a prayer team, and it was 12 people, and it was a closet prayer team. We had our corporate chaplain, and he was really making some strides with our employees. So when I turned over the chief ministry officer job to our head of clinical, we had 14 salvations in our company through a Bible study that the corporate chaplain conducted every other Monday morning before work. We had 7 salvations in one family, a Mexican family, when you could only do 10 people at a funeral. Father had died, daughter worked in our company. He did 5 funerals for 10 people and had 7 of her family members accept Christ. The prayer team grew from 12 to 42. The Bible study, when COVID hit, went on Zoom, and it went from 12 people in the corporate office to 40 people on Zoom. So what I learned from that is I should not be a ministry officer. That's not my gift. So we are now 4.5 years into it. We are into COVID. We've been shut down for 6 weeks. We're getting PPP to kind of help us get through that. And we get 2 unsolicited offers to buy the company. One from a very sharp-elbowed private equity firm that I would never do business with. And I told my CEO, I said, you can dance with those guys, but we will never sell to them. The second one was from a private equity group called Towerbrook that was in partnership with the Ascension Capital Group, the largest Catholic health system in the country. And that one, you know, that had some interest to us. And so we kind of negotiated the 2 against each other and ended up accepting an offer in December of 2020 with the Ascension Group. And when we talked to them, I said, look, if you're going to rip the ministry and the mission trips and all the things we've done here out of this company, I don't care how much you're going to pay us, we're not interested. And they looked at me and they said, we're a Catholic health system. Every one of our hospitals is a ministry. Like, well, okay, I guess that's right. And they have been true to that. They have been true to that. They start every meeting in prayer, and it's been a good partnership. So, what happened was they offered us 4 times what we did the deal at in 4.5 years earlier. And that closing in March of 2021 created 13 millionaires out of 42 employees. 3 additional people got $900,000, and this all goes into their IRA. This is money that can grow tax exempt until they retire. We had the lowest paid employees were in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. They got $400,000 to $600,000, and it changed lives. It was phenomenal for the employees. Let me read you a couple of emails I got from employees afterwards. And I might tear up on this because this was the real benefit. Just got my ESOP distribution. Wow, that is all just amazing and overwhelming at the same time. This money will catapult not only my family, but all future generations to financial security that was so unattainable before. Can you forward this email to Tom Mallon too? Because without his selflessness, this opportunity would have never happened to this first generation Mexican-American from very humble beginnings whose parents were factory workers and living paycheck to paycheck. I just want to take time to simply say thank you. Tom, thank you. The simplicity of those 2 words fails to demonstrate the enormity of my gratitude for your generosity and kindness. One of our billing and collecting ladies, you know. Then we had another woman who had a disabled child. And her comments were, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity you have provided to us through the ESOP transaction. Without you, I don't think this would have occurred, and it probably was more work and cost you more money, but that was a blessing for us. It's a game changer for housing that I can provide Kelsey, her disabled adult daughter, when I get too old to care for her. For people like her, choices are adult foster homes, group homes, or private, similar to private retirement homes, which are very expensive. But she would be better cared for there, and there are safeguards in place. Can't express how grateful I am to have this opportunity for her. Thank you. I mean, and I got like 12 of those. We had, you know, it's just truly life-changing for our employees. The investors, we got our money back, which when you're getting 8% and municipal bonds are paying 1% back then, that didn't feel good. But we got 130% more in warrant coverage. So the total return to the investors was 28%. And they were all thrilled with that, so as I was thrilled with that. But what I learned through that process was that there's a magic between aligned capital and investing. That our doctors were aligned with us, they loved us, they wanted to support us, and then that made this thing happen, and everybody did well with it. So I came, through meeting a couple other people, I determined that C12 should have aligned capital to help those members perpetuate the ministry and mission of their businesses. And so I went to the CEO and we talked with him about it, and he said, yes, you should do that. I said, will you support it? He said, no, we don't support outside organizations. So I didn't do anything for 2 years. So 2 years later, we talked to him and we said, how many of your companies have transacted? He said 10 big members have sold. What's the breakdown between ESOPs and private equity? He said 6 have gone to private equity and 4 have gone to ESOPs. How many of the private equity-backed companies are still in the organization? 0. How many of the ESOP companies are still in the organization? All 4 of them, and they're growing and it's working out great. I said, will you support us if we put together a fund to help more of your members stay members? He said, yes, we will. So in 2019, we really started down this road, hired a young man to do it, and then COVID hit, like 3 months later. So we stuck our hands in our pockets again and said, okay, we're not going to do this. I found a job in an investment for us for my one partner who we were paying every day to do this. And so when Regent sold, we had all this money coming out, and I had to find a place to put my money. And so I talked to my partners, and we ended up doing our first fund as Perpetuate Capital. It's a $12 million mortgage fund. We finance ranch land in central Texas for people who own mini ranches. And it's worked out great. It's a nice interest rate. They can't get bank financing, so it's a little higher interest rate. And there's a very low default rate. So that has worked out well. But then after we did that was in 21, we said, why don't we start doing what we really want to do? And we started talking to the same group of investors about investing with us in this we call it a structured equity fund. It's mezzanine finance. And we broke escrow on that last year. And we're in the process of raising capital for that fund, looking at deals. The interesting thing about looking at deals today is everybody wants the price that was available to them 2 years ago. Just like we'd like to buy Microsoft at the price, 5 years ago. I mean, so there's a dislocation in the market right now. We're working through that, making offers we think are fair, and eventually one will take. But we only have to do 7 to 10 deals in order to fill out our fund. And we think that'll probably take us 3 years or so. But that's our current, that's how I got there. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with you. I've met several of you in a prior trip, and it's been great to get to know the New Canaan Society. I had Matt give me a question when I walked in the door: "Is why don't you start this in Lake Tahoe?" I think the Holy Spirit's going to use that against me in the future because I don't need another project, but that would be a worthy project to do that. So